Welcome back, and today we're going to focus on aerobic respiration. So if you look at the top left, aero means air, and I want you to be thinking oxygen this whole time. This is the most efficient energy production form that any respiring organism can go through, and I'm talking about cellular respiration. But first, what materials are necessary for aerobic respiration to take place, and explain why. Hopefully, you talked about how aerobic respiration actually requires glucose and oxygen plus a little bit of water. Now, this is actually going to take place in the cytoplasm and the mitochondria. Enzymes are going to catalyze and help this reaction speed up and go along. I'm going to try and simplify all three parts of the whole entire aerobic respiration cycle, but I will tell you that there is a lot more specific information that I am not going to tell you. So what exactly happens? That glucose molecule needs to get converted. It gets converted in glycolysis, and then it's going to get further converted, and then play a little bit of hot potato with all these electrons moving around, but who cares about that for right now? All you need to definitely understand is that glucose gets converted into an ATP molecule that holds and has a lot of energy until that last phosphate group is popped off, and we use that energy for any life function. So take a second, list all the reactants and the products of cellular respiration. I'm talking about the general formula. Hopefully you wrote down that the reactants were glucose, C6H12O6, and oxygen, O2. Now if you look, there's a coefficient there. That means that there's a total of 6 oxygen molecules. So that way we have a balanced equation when we look at the products. You have 6 carbon dioxide, or CO2, molecules plus 6 H2O, or water molecules, and you end up with 36 ATP energy molecules. Now, the whole process of aerobic respiration actually is a series of oxidation and reduction reactions. Oxidation reactions are just classifying reactions that you remove the electrons from atoms and you're changing the charge on that atom. And then you have reduction, which is gaining an electron, and you're also going to change the charge of that atom to begin with. Now, the whole saying is Leo the lion goes grr. So when you lose an electron, you're going through oxidation. When you gain an electron, you're going through reduction. The whole entire transfer of electrons is what really makes ATP in aerobic respiration. And that happens in the third stage, which is the electron transport chain. So take a second and review and explain the difference between oxidation and reduction reactions. So hopefully you said that the loss of electrons is going to be oxidation and that the gain of electrons is going to be reduction. You do not need to know this for the test. I just want you to be familiar with it in case you see it on a reading for the Regents exam. And you can always hopefully be familiar with the material. So when you go to high school and you see it in chemistry class, you can impress your chem teacher. How may we identify the stages of aerobic respiration? Starts with glycolysis, which we can actually describe as an anaerobic stage, which doesn't require any oxygen. This is basically anaerobic respiration, and we're going to talk about that in our next lecture. It's very inefficient, but it does prepare the glucose molecules to further be broken down and turned into more ATP if oxygen is present. And then there's the Krebs cycle, which is where oxygen comes into play, and then the electron transport chain, which is actually where most of the ATP is made at the end of aerobic respiration. But let's focus on glycolysis first. Glycolysis is actually going to take the glucose and it's going to convert it into pyruvate, but I'm going to refer to it as pyruvic acid. They are both the same. This actually takes place in the cytoplasm. Now, in order to take that glucose molecule and split it into pyruvic acid, you actually need to use a little bit of energy. Okay, so you're going to take that glucose molecule plus 2 ATP. You're going to split that molecule into 2 pyruvic acid molecules, and you're going to end up with 4 ATP. So you spent a little bit of ATP, but you actually gained a little bit more. So I like to think of it as like if I were to start a business, I'm going to have to spend a lot of money making this business happen, but then hopefully I'm going to make a lot of money back because of my investment. So in the end, you get a net gain of 2 ATP in just this stage alone. Moving on to stage 2, which is the Krebs cycle, or stage 3, which is the electron transport chain. Both of these actually happen inside the mitochondria. You're going to take the product of stage 1 glycolysis, which are the 2 pyruvic acids. You're going to add oxygen at this point. You're going to convert it into carbon dioxide, water, and a whopping 34 ATP. So this actually happens by taking the pyruvic acids, converting them into a bunch of high energy molecules that are going to further go down the electron transport chain, which is a series of all of these embedded proteins. Now, this is where like the game of hot potato happens. All these molecules are being forced through, and electrons are going everywhere, and all these hydrogen ions are going everywhere, and it allows this ATP synthase to actually create a bunch of ATP by the movement of these hydrogen ions and high energy molecules back into the cell. It's crazy, 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 but it ends up working, and I think it's amazing. So the bottom line, pyruvic acid is further metabolized to release a lot of energy. Carbon dioxide and water become waste products, and we're going to get rid of those things. If I had to summarize this whole entire idea, your body eats food, breaks it down into usable simple sugars, then those are going to enter the cell. In cytoplasm, those carbohydrates or the simple sugars such as glucose are going to be further broken down and converted into pyruvic acid through glycolysis. Now, you're going to use a little bit of ATP to make that happen, but you end up gaining 2 ATP in the end. Now, you take those pyruvic acids, you go into the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain, you further break them down and then convert them into 34 ATP, resulting in a total of 36 ATP. Hopefully this helps. If you have any questions, come to class with them, and I'm looking forward to moving forward.